Okay, so we will be doing a crosshatch shoe sheet. So this is going to require you to kind of use different layers and different densities of crosshatching to create these different kind of tonal areas here across this worksheet. In preparation for that, what we're going to do is we're going to create some crosshatch shapes that look a little bit like this. So we're going to do a cone and we're going to do a sphere, but we're going to start with the cone because that's a little bit easier. Now, something I really want everyone to remember today is that we are trying to create the illusion of a shape, so a curve. So obviously we want this to make this cone look like it is rounded. If we put straight lines across there, it's not going to create that rounded effect. Instead, what we need to do is we need to make these lines here which curve around the edge of the cone. So they echo this line at the bottom, so they follow this line around the whole cone like this, and I'll show you a little bit more of that in a minute. Now obviously this side here we've got lots of kind of marks, they're really close together. I've applied more pressure, and then as I come across this cone here, you can see that there's a really bright highlight on the left hand side, and then we've got some mid-tones in the middle. It's really important to remember to leave the white of the paper. We can just use that to create the highlights, and then obviously the darker areas here are built up using more layers. So I'm just going to start, as I said earlier, by doing the cone first of all. So here we go. Alright. So I find it much easier, and I would like everybody to turn their paper around. Now, as I said earlier, the idea is that you're going to follow this line here. You're going to follow this curve. The easiest way to do that is to start at this side here, but before we do that, we're just going to put a very faint construction line down the middle. It does want to be really faint. Now you can make faint lines with your biro if you want to turn those over. Okay, you just want to have a practice with them. So when you press hard, obviously you're going to get a dark line. If you press really gently, you can create these nice faint lines. So once you feel confident doing that, just flip that over. Okay, draw a very faint line down the centre. You don't really want to see it at all like that. That's more than enough. Okay, and as I said, turn it around. If you're left-handed, you might want to turn it the other way round, but if you're right-handed, it's going to be this way. Then the next thing to do is obviously just take some time, have a look at the shadows here on this example. You can see that they're much darker here, and they want to fade round slowly into a highlight. So the easiest way to do that is in a similar way to when we did pencil. We're going to use our pressure. Now the main difference is that we're not using circular motions, we're using lines. So these lines here, these initial lines, they are going to follow this bottom line here. Okay, they want to curve all the way around like this, look. Okay. So keep your eye on the lines, make sure that they curve. They should be running roughly parallel to each other. Okay. Now you can see, or hopefully you can see, that I've started to kind of flick those lines out when I get to this middle kind of construction line, and that's because I don't want the mid-tone to go into my highlights. Okay, so at the moment I'm leaving a gap. Okay, I'm making sure that I can go back into those areas later, so I don't want them to be too dark at the moment, these lines. They can be quite gentle to begin with, because just like with tonal pencil that we practiced a few weeks ago, it's much easier to add more layers over the top. So obviously these lines at the top are going to be very small because this area of shadow is quite small. So just work back over those. As I said, make sure that you flick them really gently into that kind of this space here, which will become our highlight. Alright, so I'm going to turn that round now, and obviously that's not dark enough, that's not nowhere near dark enough. You can see from the example that I made earlier that I need to add quite a lot more lines on there before it's finished. Now I find it easier if I turn this round. Alright, I find that much easier because then what I can do is I can go along this line here. Okay, so I can start at the bottom and I will just kind of put lines really close together. Don't worry about this blobbing, this kind of little splodges that sometimes can be created with the biro. It's just unfortunately the nature of the media. Don't worry about it. So I want my lines really close together here, but I want to very quickly start kind of separating those out, so leaving more of a gap. And as I come across this section here, and as soon as I hit this line here, then there wants to be quite a big gap. I mean, you don't really need very much in here at all. Okay, like that, very gentle, very pale. So this still isn't quite shadowy enough for me. So I'm just going to keep layering on some dark lines. You can go along the edge of the shape if you like, just to kind of crisp those edges up, just to get that really nice, neat, controlled finish. So as you can see, as I was saying before, it's much easier to add some darker areas afterwards just by building up those layers like that. Okay. Now, I'd still like it to be a little bit darker still, so you can see that now I need to add some diagonal lines. So I'm just going to flip that round again, and I'm just going to layer those over the top. Okay, now I'm going to curve my diagonal lines ever so slightly. Okay, if you could have a go at that, that'd be amazing. As I said, you want to curve them very slightly to give that illusion of a form there. Okay, and I'm just going to repeat that process on the other side. So I'm going to have some diagonal lines going the other way, just like we practiced when we were doing those cross-hatch tonal scales last time. So remember, the more layers you have going in the more different directions, then obviously the darker tone you will create. So really what we're doing is we're putting those skills that we learnt last week into action, okay, to create a three-dimensional shape. Okay, I've got a little bit up there, that looks a little bit too pale to me. I'm going to spin that round, add a little bit more over the top. Okay, and roughly speaking, your cone should look something like this. Okay. Now if you want to have a go at the shadow, you can do. You can see this one here, I've used my marks and I've flicked it out this way. Okay, I've just flicked it out to the end, and then obviously I've layered lots and lots of lines in this area here, and I've started to separate them out as I move towards the end of the shadow. Okay. Right, so we're going to have a go at the sphere now. So the sphere is a little bit more challenging. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a very faint circle in the middle. So if I look again at my example sphere here, you can see that this highlight is quite big. It takes up quite a lot of this space. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a very gentle little circle there, little highlights. Okay, I know where I want to create my highlights. Okay, so I'm just planning it out basically. The very first thing that you should do is just kind of spin this round, and again in a similar way to we were trying to copy these or follow these kind of curved outlines in the cone, that's what we're going to do now as well. Alright, so following along the edge like this. Okay. The difference is, however, that I am going to bring that line in before I get to the round the other side. So I'm not doing circles inside circles. My circles are going to start here and then just finish on the other side. Okay, so I'll show you how to spin it round. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can do it freehand, okay, like this. So you can layer up lots of circles, okay, like this. Obviously we want to be kind of leaving this middle section quite plain. But this can be quite tricky, and it does take a little bit of practice. So an easier way to do this is just to, as I said earlier, follow those outline shapes, so this curve. Again, I'm putting it really close together here on this section. I'm spinning it round. Okay. And I'm just working into that area here to create like a nice dark shadow. So you can see that I'm starting to get a shadow here, but this is a really abrupt line, and obviously we want lines to, obviously we want tone to fade gradually. So I'm just going to work on top of that. I'm going to press much harder when I'm working into this kind of shadowy side, and I'm flicking my lines around, look. So I'm flicking my lines around as I come further towards this highlighted shape at the top. Okay, and around the other side, like that. And you can see I'm starting to create that darker tone. It is easier to draw any sort of curve with your hand inside the curve. Remember, we talked about this when we did the key drawings. So remember to always be rotating your drawing like this. and then very, very gently into the middle. Okay, so that's the first stage. The next stage is we're going to put some other lines which curve around the sphere like this. Okay, so you can see on the left hand side they're curving out to the left and then in. On the right hand side they're curving around to the right and then in. And then only these ones here in the very centre are fairly straight. Okay, so I'm going to start with some fairly straight lines here. I'm going to flick them, you see, into the centre like this. And it's really important that we're using curved lines and we're thinking about the direction that those lines move in, because as I said earlier, what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of create the illusion of a shape or a form just by using mark making. So remember we looked at last week lots of different artists who use this. So Henry Moore is a big fan of mark making. Loads and loads of graphic book novel artists use this technique. It's very, very popular in kind of like comic art and things like that. So it is quite widely used. There we go. So try not to put too much kind of tone on this left hand side here, as I said. Okay, until you end up something like that. That was probably a bit nicer. Okay.